Hey there, welcome back to my channel. This is what we built in the last video. So we created a tool where you can select a player and then it will show either a heat map of where those events are coming from, or you can go to the events page and then it will show the actual events by that player. So you can select a specific event like hits, or you can select goals. And now you can see when you select goals, it zooms into those events. We can start off by fixing that. So we just need to go to the zoom and then just say it should not zoom to objects. So I think it should work now. So if we select goals, now it doesn't zoom in. So that was the first step. So, but other than that, so in this video, we want to create a tool or create the basis for a tool where you can select several players and then see the results when those players are playing on the ice together. And that's not super easy to do. It's somewhat complicated. So this video might be a little bit long. I don't know yet, but it is not super straightforward to do, but we'll get through it. So let's just start off by going to my website and show an example of what we're trying to build. So if we go to the statistics part, we can go to the line tool. So we're not building something looking exactly like this, but this is like the premise of it. So we have a tool here where you can select a team and the string state, and then you can select several players and it will show the results when those players are on the ice together. So in this case, you have Ovechkin, Strome, and Wilson playing almost 300 minutes on the ice together at 5-on-5. So if we remove one player, then we'll see that Ovechkin and Strome has 550 minutes on the ice together. So that's kind of what we're trying to build here. So we want to have a tool, a visualization where you can select a player and then you can select another player and another player, and it will keep filtering down the data so that we only have the results when those players are on the ice together. And in here, there's also, you can see individual data. So here it shows the on-ice stats when they are on the ice together, and here's the on-ice stats for just Ovechkin in all of his minutes, including those with Dylan Strome. And you can see goals. So if you go to totals, it will show up. So Ovechkin has 1100 minutes of ice time altogether at 5-on-5, and 550 of those are with Dylan Strome. And he has 8 goals with Strome and 14 goals in total. So that's kind of what we're trying to build here. Something that looks like this. But as I said, this is not super straightforward to get to this point. But let's just shut it down here and go back to our Power BI project. So the first thing we want to do is we'll just duplicate this page because we're going to keep some of it anyway. We'll do the names later on. But we want to have a page where you can select 3 players. So let's just remove some of this. Let's delete this one. And to start with, let's just, we can still use these, but let's just hide them for now. And we still need some of these filters over here, so let's just keep them for now. Right now it's not filtering anything. But we do need some more data because there are some data that we didn't import in the last video. So let's go to the Power Query editor. And in here we can see we have the play-by-play data, we have the players table, we have the schedule, we have a teams table, and that's it. So we need to have the shift data as well. So the way we do that is we can say new source, And then we can select the MySQL database. And the server is localhost 3306, I think, and the database is called YouTube. So I think this should work. And yes, so here we have all the tables in our database. So what we want to add is we want to add the player shift table. So this one has all player shifts by all players in that season. And then we want to add the shift index as well. So this one has all shifts, when it starts and when it ends, and what the string state is. Okay, so those are the two tables that we need in order to create our on-ice tool or our line tool. So let's just start off by adding those. Now the player shifts table is quite large. I think it's 6 million rows or something like that. So we do need to think about how we set things up and how much we need in our tool. So actually, this one is already pretty stripped, so it's just player ID, team, shift index, and venue. Now the venue part we don't need for our tool here, so we'll just remove that one. Say we don't need the venue. And then we have the shift index. And the way we want to set it up is we want to filter the player shifts one time, and then we want to filter it another table that looks like it, and then we want to filter another one that looks like it, in order to get our filters 3 times for each player, 1 time for each player. So it is a little bit complicated. I hope it makes more sense once we get to do it. So let's just rename this. So this will be player 1. Actually, let's call it player shifts 1. Okay. And then we have our shift index table. So in order to get things to work, we need to have shift indexes between each of the selections. Otherwise, you'll have a many-to-many relationship. But we'll get to that. But the point is, let's just duplicate one of these. The point is, we need one table that's just the shift index column and nothing more. So let's start off by, we can call this one shift index 1, because we'll have multiple of those tables in order to get our functionality to work. So here we'll just say all we need is the shift index column. So it's just a simple table, one column with all the shift indexes. And these are different. And then we have the last table that we need to create in here is, let's just call it shift index. Maybe you have a better name for it. But this table we need to have at the end, once we've filtered down everything, then we need to have a table where we can calculate the ice time for each for the selection. So we need to, first of all, we need to have a duration of each shift. So that's just end minus start. And then we need to be able to know we need to be able to know the string state. So we need to figure out if the team we've selected is the away team or the home team. But let's start off by just calculating a new column. Let's call it duration. So it's super simple. It's just duration is equal to end minus start. Let's just say it's a whole number. So this just gives us the duration of each shift. So now we don't need this start and end anymore. So now we can put the string states in one column and then add a venue as well. So let's just see here how it goes. So what we do is we unpivot the selected columns. So what it does is it duplicates. So now we have twice as many rows. But we put it all in one column. So now we have the string state in just one column, based on whether or not it's away or home. So let's just rename this to venue, and this one to string state. And then in this one, we can say we only want the first 4 characters because we only want to know if it's away or home. Okay. So we need to have, so in this table, what we want to have is we want to have the ability to filter it based on a selection. So we want to have slices with venue, we want to have slices with the team, and we want to have a slicer with the string state. And also we want to have a slicer with the season stage, whether it's the regular season or the playoffs. So we still need a few columns in this one in order to calculate the time on ice based on the slicer selection, if that makes sense. So what we need is we need to use the schedule table, and we want to merge these two based on the game ID and the venue. But the problem in this one is that we don't have the venue. We just have the away team and the home team. But it's all put in one row. So we actually need to start off by duplicating this one. Let's just call it schedule 2. And this table, we're not using this table for anything within our Power BI report, so we don't need to load it. So we can just enable load. So now it does update the table if we update the data, but it doesn't load the table into Power BI. Okay, so now we need to set this table up so that we can merge it with our shift index table. So we need to have a venue column, so we need to do that the same way that we did in the shift index. So we need to do the unpivot columns transformation. But let's just start off by saying what kind of columns we need. So we need the game ID. The season is not really relevant because we're just looking at data from one season. We need the game type because we need the game type to determine whether it's a regular season game or a playoff game. And then we need the away team and the home team. And I think that's it. So let's start off by saying, adding a column. We need to add, we'll call this one season stage. So this is super easy. If game type equals 2, then it's a regular season game, else it's playoffs. So that's just how the data is set up. So 2 means regular season, 3 means playoffs, and 1 means preseason. But we don't have any preseason games in our data. So let's just put it up like this. And now we can say this is a text, and we can even just remove the game type. We don't need that anymore. And now we can do the unpivot columns. And it sets up. So now we have one row for each team in each game. And then we can just, like we did before, say this one is venue and this one is team. And then in this one, we'll just extract the first 4 characters. So it says away or home. And now we have a table that we can merge with our shift index table. So that was a lot of work just to merge the 2 tables. Let's say merge queries. And we need to merge on the game ID and the venue. And we need to merge that with schedule 2, game ID and venue. So once we merge these 2, we'll get the team and the season stage for each shift in the shift index. So we can just extract it. Say we want to have the season stage and the team. So that was a fair amount of work, but now we have a shift index table that we can filter based on venue, string state, season stage, and team. So this is what we want. This is what we need in order to calculate the time on ice based on the duration column. Okay, so now we have what we need. So let's just load it to Power BI. And again, this will take just a little while because the player shift table is 6 million rows. But it does load it quite quickly, so it's not that much work. Anyway, but there is 6 million rows in that table. Yes, so that's it. Now we have all the data that we need in order to build our report. One thing I forgot to mention is that in our play-by-play data, if we go all the way over here, you can see there is no shift index column at the end. But I actually already fixed that in here. So that's because we forgot to add the shift index from the play-by-play shift index table. But I've written the code here in order to add that to our play-by-play data table. So I'll just leave this in the description as well. The script right here. All it does is it takes all of the columns in the play-by-play data, and then at the very end it adds the shift index column. But we haven't added it yet, so we actually need to refresh the data. Okay, so now everything is refreshed, and you can see in the play-by-play data we've added a shift index column at the very end. So we need to have this column in order to connect our shift data with our play-by-play data. Okay, so far so good. So now let's go to the model view here. Let's just zoom out a bit. So we have a lot of tables here. So we added this shift index here. Let's just start off by removing all relationships. So we have our schedule table, our players table, our play-by-play table, and then we have our teams table. So all of these were things we used in the first video for our first dashboard. Now we need to have let's just remove all relationships with all the new table we've added. And the measures table doesn't need any relationships. So we added these three tables here. So what we need to do is we need to filter this table based on a team selection and a player selection. And then we need to add a new table that looks exactly like this. And then we need to filter that one based on a new player selection. And then we need to do it one more time. So we actually need this table 3 times in order for this to work. So we can just add those tables if we go to table view, and then you can go to table tools and say add new table. And it was called player shifts. Instead of 1, we'll call it player shifts 2. And it should just be all no blank rows from the player shifts 1 table. So when we hit enter here, it will just create a new duplicate table of the player shift table. And again, this is 6 million, so it just takes a little while, but there's only 3 columns, so it's not that complicated anyway. And we need to do this just one more time. So we'll add yet another table, player shift 3, hit enter. And that's it. So now we have 3 player shifts table. So in order to get our data model to work, we need to first filter this one, then use that filter to filter it even more based on another player selection, and then we need to filter it one last time based on the third player selection, and then we can connect it to our play-by-play data. So I hope this makes sense. But we can't just use our players table here to filter it up here and our teams table to filter it up here. So we actually need to make new players tables and new teams table and one new team table as well. So again, we'll do that in the table view, and we'll go to add new table. Let's start off by creating a player table. So we need 3 different player tables from where we can create our slices from. So it will just be player 1 is equal to all no blank rows. And then it's YouTube players. So this is the table that we want to duplicate. And this is no problem. These tables are very small, so Power BI will easily handle those. So now we have another table with all the player data that we can use in order to, what should I say, in order to filter down our table, our data. So we just need to create 2 more of these. So it's just player 2. And one last. Player 3. Okay, so let's go to the model view again. So the idea is that we have one table here that we connect the player ID with the player ID. And then we do the same with this one. It's a little bit small. Let's go closer. Player ID to player ID. Player ID to player ID. And all of these actually has to go in both directions, because we want to filter this one based on the team selection, and then we only want to be able to select players on that specific team. So if the direction is just going from player 1 to player shift, then we won't have that functionality. Then you would be able to select all players, and that's not what we want. We only want to have players from the selected team. So we need to make this one go in both directions. And we need to do the same for the others. Okay, so the reason why we have these one column shift index tables, well, actually we just have one at the moment, but we need 3 of these, is so that we can connect the shift index with the shift index. So if we try and do this, you see that it's a many-to-many connection. And it might work anyway, but it's always a bit concerning when you have many-to-many connections. So what we'll do is we'll just put in a bridge table. So we'll do a connection shift index to shift index, and this one has to be in both directions. And then we can make a shift index to shift index connection. And this one has to be single direction. So this one filters this one, but this one doesn't filter this one. That's quite important to understand. And so we need to create a bridge table between these two tables as well. And then finally we need to create a bridge table between our player shifts and the play-by-play data. So we need 2 more of these tables. But we also need a new team table that we can use to filter the teams here, here, and here. So let's just create those. So we need a new team table. We can call that teams. Let's call it on ice. And it's equal to all no blank rows. YouTube teams, that's correct. And then we also needed to duplicate the shift index table. So let's just say shift index 2 equals all no blank rows, shift index 1. And we'll do this one more time. Shift index 3. Okay, so again, this is a little bit complicated. I know that. But I think this is the smartest way to do it because it is a little bit complicated. And this will work really well and quite quickly, even though we are working with relatively large data sets here. So now we just need to connect this one to this one, and it has to be both directions. This one to this one, just single direction. This one to this one, both directions. And then this last one has to be connected to the shift index in our play-by-play table. And it has to go just in that direction. Okay, and the last thing is our teams table needs to be connected to the player shifts table. And the other player shifts table. And when we do this, it won't be active, I think. So we have to make sure the relationship is active. And then we need to do the same for the last player shifts table, make it active. And that is it. So now we can start to build our dashboard here. So now instead of having just one player that we select, we need to have 3 players that we can select. So this one has to be a lot smaller, and also the name shouldn't come from our YouTube players table, but it should come from the player 1 table. So let's just remove this one and put in the name from the other table. And we can even rename this to player 1. So now we can select any player that's in the league. The image, we also need to fix that, but let's just start off by doing it this way. And let's make the size of the name a little bit smaller. So how wide is this? 300, I think that's too much, maybe 280, if I remember correctly. So let's just try and copy these so that we have 3. Copy this one. And copy one last one. Okay, I think this is fine. Maybe you can work with the details of it. Let's just start it by aligning these so they are at the same height. So you go to Format, Align, let's align top. And then just do the same for the others. Align top. So yeah, that's it. Right now, they're taking the name from the player 1 table in all of these. We don't want that. We want this one to come from the player 2 table. And let's call it player 2. And then do the same here. From the player 3 table, name. Remove this one. Player player 3. So now we have all of these in place. Let's fix the images as well. So right now we have a player image measure that just looks up the image based on the player ID. We need to have this, but we don't. We need to take the player ID not from the YouTube players table, but we need to take it from the player 1 table, the player 2 table, and the player 3 table. So let's just copy this one. And then create a new measure. So we can call it player 1 image. And then instead of having this one, we need to take, the table is called player 1 player ID. So this should work. Now, let's just try and do this. So it didn't change anything because we need to fix it in here as well. So we need to go to images, go to image URL, and then instead of using the image player image, we need to use the player 1 image. So now it should change it to AJ Greer. And if we choose someone else, it changes the image. Now the problem is if I select, so we need to be able to select more than one player. So let's just fix that. So in slicer settings, let's unselect the single select. So now if we select all, then it will just show an image of Marc-Andre Fleury because he has the lowest player ID because he came into the league the first. So we need to fix this. So if there's more than one player selected, then the image should not be Marc-Andre Fleury. It should be a blank image. So it's the last thing we need to fix in this measure. So let's just say if the count of player 1 player IDs is equal to 1, then we'll look up this player ID. Otherwise, we'll leave it blank. So if true, then we will have this image URL. If untrue, then it will be blank. So now when we hit enter, it should be a blank image. And that works. So if we select a player, things are good. If we select all, there is no image. Maybe you would put in like a default image or something, but now we'll just leave it blank. So we need to do the same for the other two images. So we'll just copy this one and create two new measures. Player 2 image, and we need to take it from the player 2 table. And we need to take the player ID from the player 2 table. So that's it. And then create the last image measure. Copy it and say player 3. Player 3. And player 3. And then we just need to fix the images so that it comes from the player 2 image measure. And the same here. Player 3 image. Okay, so now if we select another player, it will be another image, and things should be working quite well. So let's just try and unselect everything here. But we haven't put in a team yet, so let's put that one on top. So we need to be able to select a team, and that team should be selected from our teams on ice table. So actually, let's put in the full name so you can select all full names, and you can see you can select from a lot of teams that are not in the NHL currently. Let's start off by just saying team, and then go to filter. So we are only including current teams. So this is data from the 23-24 season, so we still have the Arizona Coyotes. Okay, that's it. So now we've added a filter so you can only select teams that actually were in the league that season. So if we select the Anaheim Ducks, then you can only select players that played on Anaheim Ducks. And then if you select Adam Henrique, you can only select players that Adam Henrique played with for at least one shift. So you can select someone, and then you can only select players that played with Henrique and Lyubushkin. So now you have a selection where you can select 3 players, and then it should filter the data based on that selection. So let's go to our model view here again. So now we have selected a team, and that filters down the player shifts table. And then for each player shifts table, we're selecting one player, which filters it down. Then it goes to the next one, filters that one down based on the player selection, filters that one, and then it filters the last one based on the third player selection. And then it filters down the play-by-play data where we have all the shot information based on those selections over here. Okay, so far so good. So if we actually go here and add our event table, it's actually already working. So this data comes from our play-by-play table. So if we unselect the player, then you will see more events. So these are all the events happening with Adam Henrique and Lyubushkin on the ice together. Now, currently, it doesn't tell us anything about whether the event is for Anaheim Ducks or against Anaheim Ducks. So it just puts all events on the rink together, and all the offensive zone is always in this end, depending on the event team. So if it's an event by Anaheim Ducks, then the offensive zone is right here. If it's an event by their opponent, then the offensive zone is also in this end. So we can't really tell whether or not Anaheim Ducks is having more shots on net or less shots on net than the opponent with this selection right here. It just puts all of the events on a rink. So we need to split it up somehow, but we'll do that in the next video. I also just want to show the other map here. So for some reason, I'm not 100% sure why this is, but it's showing all white when you haven't selected an event. But if we select goal, for instance, then it will show where are goals happening with the two players on the ice together. And again, we can't say if it's for Anaheim or against Anaheim. But we can see where things are happening. You can see hits. So hits are almost always just around the boards, and you have very few hits in the middle of the ice. You can see actually with these two guys on the ice, there is not a single hit in the offensive zone, neither for or against Anaheim Ducks. There are hits in front of the net, and there are hits along the boards in the defensive zones. But this is quite interesting, I think. So you can see events, you can see face-offs. It should be noted that there is nothing in this box right here, and all the center ice face-offs are put in this box. That's because I decided to include the center ice to the right of the center line. So all events happening exactly at the center line is being put in these three boxes. So that's just, I had to decide whether to put it in one box or the other box. But other than that, there's nothing weird about this. There are fewer face-offs in these positions that I expected. You see most of the face-offs being taken in the offensive zone or the defensive zone. Anyway, this works, and we filtered the data down to based on the player selections. But we do want to also calculate the time on ice that they have together. So let's do that as the last thing today. So let's go here. So we filtered the data down to these particular shifts, and then we need to connect that with our shift index. So this is the table that includes season stage, it includes the duration of each shift, it includes the strength state, the team, the venue. So let's just connect these two. So now we can see that, so now it will calculate the duration of all shifts for each team. So right now, all of the shifts will be in here twice because we haven't filtered it by team yet. So we also need to have this one connected to this one. And we need to make it active. So now we can try and calculate the time on ice. So let's just create a new measure. And this is super easy to do. So we'll just say time on ice equals the sum of shift index duration. And let's divide it by 60 so that we have it in minutes instead of seconds. And that's it. So we can just, let's put in a card. And let's try and put in the time on ice. And you can see here that when Henrik and Lyabushkin are on the ice together, they played 243 seconds. And if we clear it here, you can see Adam Henrik had a total of 1060 seconds. So let's just go to call out values. Let's make it a little bit smaller, 24. And also let's go to select time on ice and then put it in the center, and we don't want to have any units, so now it says 1055, and we don't want any decimal places either, so let's put that one to 0. So now we have the time on ice, and this is based on the player selection, so you can select any player and then it will calculate how many minutes do they have on the ice together. So you can see these only have 1 minute of ice time together, so they probably didn't play on a line at any point together, but they just happened to be on the ice at the same time for a total of 1 minute. Yeah, so this works. So we've set it up now so that you can select 3 players and then it will show the events with those 3 players on the ice together, and it calculates the time on ice they have on the ice together. The last thing we need to do is we need to fix this one. So if we select that one is perhaps not so interesting. So if we select only away games, then it will filter the data, but it won't filter this one, as you see. And so it's not really doing what we want it to. That's because this one only filters the play-by-play data, but we need to apply that filter to our shift index as well. So we'll do that by, so instead of taking this venue from the play-by-play data, and instead of taking it from the shift index table, this one, we'll take it from a dimension table. So we need to create a new table that we'll add as a dimension table. So this is often how you set it up in Power BI. So instead of filtering the fact tables, so you would call the large tables, you would call fact tables, and instead of filtering those directly, you would create a new table and use that for our slices to filter our data. Now the advantage of doing it this way is that you can add one slicer and have it filtering multiple tables. So let's just remove these, and then we'll create new tables, and then we'll add those to our filter panel. Okay, so let's just add the new tables by entering the data, because it's just going to be small tables. So we want one, let's call it dimension, dim for dimension, and venue. Let's say venue, let's say away, and home. So this is all that needs to be in this table. So let's just load this. And then we can add it here. Dim venue. So now you can select away or home, but we need to ensure that the connections are correct. So let's just put it over here somewhere. So you can see the dimension table filters our shift index, that's correct, but we also needed to filter our play-by-play data. So we need to create another relationship, venue. That's it. So now if we select home, you'll see that he has 538 minutes at home and 517 minutes away from home. And there's a blank here, we don't want to include that. So let's just go to filter and say we don't want to include the blanks in our dimension table. So now this one works, and we need to do the same for the string state and the season stage. So let's just create two new tables, dim season stage, season stage, then let's say regular and playoffs. Let's load it. Yes, and then we'll do the same for the string state. Dim string state. I will say string state. Let's say 5 on 5, 5 on 4, 5 on 3, 4 on 5, 3 on 5, 4 on 4, 3 on 3. What else do we have? We have 4 on 3, 3 on 4, and then we have empty net against. So when you're playing against an empty net, and we have empty net 4 when you're playing with your net empty. Okay, so this should work, but in our slicer it will automatically order these by alphabet, and that's not really what we want. So let's just add one last column, priority. So this means that we can order them based on this priority. So let's just put them in this order. Okay, let's try and load it. And then we need to create the correct relationships. Okay, so the season stage is already correct. So we just need to ensure that the string states is also connected to the play-by-play table. And that's it. So now we can add them here. Say season stage. And string state. So now you can see if we select playoffs, it will be blank because Anaheim Ducks didn't play in the playoffs that season. So if we go back to regular season, you can see this one doesn't go correct because we need to just reload the page. And now things are working. And if we go to string state, you can see that the order is not really what we want. First of all, we don't want to be able to select blank values. So let's remove those. Secondly, we don't want to have the order with 3 on 3 on top. We also don't want to have a search. So we want to order these based on the priority that we created. So how do we do that? We go to click on string state, and then we can say sort column by priority. So now it should work. It goes 5 on 5 on top. Okay, so again we can select 5 on 5, and it should filter the data down. So you can see Adam Henrique has 721 minutes of ice time, 5 on 5. And if we look at the events map, we'll see all events with Adam Henrique on the ice at 5 on 5. We could choose, now it's only away, now it's only home. So you can switch between things, see are there any difference in how a team plays at home versus away from home. And you can choose to select to look at something specific. So these are where the goals are coming from. 5 on 5, how is it 5 on 4, 5 on 3, and so on and so on. So I don't think I want to make this video any longer, but this was a little bit complicated. But it needs to be complicated in order to get the functionality where you can select one player, filter the data, select another player, filter the data, select the third player, and filter the data. But this does work quite quickly as well, even though we're talking about 3 tables with 6 million rows. It is working quite well. So I think that's all I want to do in this video. In the next video, we will try to split up the data so that we will have all data for Anaheim Ducks on one side of the ice, and then all data for the opponents on the other side. And then we'll probably just look at the offensive zone results. So you can have all goals scored by Anaheim in this end, and then all goals scored by their opponents in the other end. And then we'll add a few measures, we'll add some data to it so we can put up how many goals are they scoring with Adam Henrique and Cologne on the ice together, so that we can set it up correctly. That part is actually the easy part. The difficult part was getting the model to work. So this is fairly complicated, I would argue. But it is working, and it is working quite well. It just takes a bit of training to fully understand what's going on here. But view it as instead of filtering everything at once, view it as a step-by-step filtering. So we're starting at one point, then we're filtering the data, filtering the data, filtering the data, and then connecting the data to the play-by-play table. So I hope it made sense, and I look forward to making the next video, and hopefully you'll join me in that one as well. So see you.